I mean, for us, it was safety. My father was involved politically in Mexico and his life was threatened, so he had to flee and we had to go into hiding. But when you think about which, we had to, but the things that he gave up, I mean, his practice, he was a veterinarian, in Mexico. They were building a new house. But more important than that is the relationships. I could feel like that wound in my father all of the time.
For me, I've had to learn how to curate my mental health, right? Because being in community means that like you're receiving everyone's energy, right? Like being in community means that like you're putting yourself out there and you're increasing your vulnerability, right? Which means like you're open to a lot. And so I tend not to view leadership or being in community as like this like lovey-dovey warm thing. It can be. There are plenty of warm and powerful and loving moments in that space. And so I think that that's why being in community with yourself is so important, right? Because you have to judge like how much you're able to take. You have to judge about how much you're willing to give. And only you can determine that.
Welcome to From Home to Here, where we dive deep into the compelling stories of immigrants and children of immigrants to shift the narrative and break the silence barrier. I'm your host, Brandon McAnderson. Together, we will explore the journeys that shape and define us. I am now joined by my literal favorite person in the world, Alejandra Villalobos-McAnderson, the owner of Villalobos Vitality, board member for I Have an Immigrant, recent most wanted participant on behalf of Big Brothers Big Sisters. She is everywhere in this community. She is determined to serve with love and light while maintaining the integrity of the tools for healing and honoring the legacy of her ancestors. We are also joined by Edgar Palacios. He is an influential nonprofit, Latino education collaborative. I mean, I would read this whole bio, but we would be here all day.
Please do.
Rev Ed, Edgar's educational background. No, we're just going to read it straight up. MBA from Rockhurst, Bachelor's of Music from UMKC, certified nonprofit manager, just about everything. And a guy that's in this community doing the right things, doing the work. And he was someone that we definitely wanted to talk to. Edgar, Alex, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So part of this is telling the immigrant story. So let's start there. Alex, let's start with your immigrant story. Let's talk about your origins and how you came to be here.
Yes. So I was born in Guadalajara, Mexico. My family had to move we had to flee basically Mexico due to some unforeseen circumstances and safety issues. So we moved to California, and I grew up in California most of my life and ended up coming to Kansas City in 2004. I got a soccer scholarship to play soccer at Baker, and my immigrant story has always been woven into everything that I do, with having to come to a school that didn't care about my immigration status while I was in college during the time where I was undocumented. And that's how I ended up in Kansas City. And now Kansas City is my community, and I'm trying to show up and pay it forward, just like all of those people that kind of opened up doors for me on my way here.
Absolutely. How about you, Edgar? Tell us a little about your story.
Yeah, so my family is from Nicaragua in 1981, and I was born a few years after in Miami, Florida. I lived there till I was 11, and then moved to Spokane, Washington, did 3 years there, middle school there, did high school in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and then in 2004, I moved up to Kansas City, and I've been here ever since. And so, it's interesting for me when I think about an immigrant story. I'm still learning from my parents. I'm still learning some of the hidden stories that they've kept either from me, either strategically or, just because of whatever trauma was associated with it. But even this weekend, I learned a little bit more about my family and their journey and why they made the decisions they made. And so I think it's really powerful that there's a platform for people to share those stories and or hopefully that to connect with others.
Absolutely. And I would be remiss if I didn't share my own story. I am a first-generation Dominican immigrant. My father moved to the Dominican Republic when he was 9 years old, to New York, and then to Germany, and then to Georgia, and then finally in Kansas City and Leavenworth. Went to high school in Leavenworth. So I know what you mean by you kind of learn more about it as you go. I know my father doesn't talk about it because it was trauma, but he doesn't remember it as trauma. He remembers it as a day in his life. So if there's something that I bring up to him specifically, he'll elaborate, but oftentimes he'll keep the stories because he doesn't see, the magnitude of it the way that I do. So I got to make sure that I'm consistently asking questions and getting to learn what he sacrificed, because I think that's a part of the immigrant story that is not loud enough, is what they sacrificed to come here. Like, let's start there. Like, what do you know about the sacrifice of your parents? I've talked to them a lot and your family, and what I hear is, I want to go home, but they can't. They came here for a reason. So just talk about some of those origins of what your family was motivated by.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was safety. My father was involved politically in Mexico and his life was threatened, so he had to flee, and we had to go into hiding. But when you think about which we had to, but the things that he gave up, I mean, his practice, he was a veterinarian, in Mexico. They were building a new house. But more important than that is the relationships. I could feel like that wound in my father all of the time. My father thankfully became a citizen 2 years ago, and that's really a tip for him then. But he didn't go back home for like 20, 25 years. He didn't get to go and bury his mother when she passed. And that caused such a wound in him. And I still feel that. So to me, it's not even like the physical things that you're leaving, but you're leaving like a land that remembers you. You're leaving a place of your ancestors. You're leaving, it almost feels like you're becoming uprooted. And un until you have felt that or experienced that, it's really hard sometimes for people to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's value in telling that part of the story because, like, everybody wants to go to Mexico, even the people in Mexico. They left for livelihood reasons. They left to enrich their lives, to help their children. I know this is a very personal story to me. You're my wife, so I've done as much research as I possibly can.
What?
Yeah. Oh, no. So I've done as much research as I can on this. And one of the things, I always think about media, and I like to take in things like that. And I just remember, that season of Narcos on Netflix. It talks specifically about the 1988 election, which you came in 1989. Talks specifically about how they just burned ballots because they thought they were going to lose. Now, Narcos has a different version of it that's more theatrical,
Yeah.
but essentially this is what happened. They fixed the election, and those kind of implications affect people, and they cause people to want to start new beginnings. How about you, Edgar? Talk a little about that return, like what it feels like for home for your people, and why they left, and what they missed.
Yeah, I think my parents fled to the Civil War, right? I think, again, you had American intervention in Nicaragua at that time. I think my dad was also politically engaged as well. And so definitely not part of the Sandinista movement. And so they left for safety. I know that they hid on one of my family members' farms for a little bit. They were afraid that my older sister would be hurt and harmed in some ways. And so they left. I mean, you leave everything, right? They took a plane from Managua to Miami, and they could only carry so much. And, one of my favorite stories that they share is that, it's probably the first or second week in the country. They don't know a lick of English. Thankfully, Miami's a little bit easier to navigate.
Yeah.
Still, you
Yeah.
find yourself in places. And so they were hungry. They went to a restaurant, and they had no idea what an omelet was. And so they just like picked it because like they could pronounce it, right?
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, all these eggs come out. Fell right back. They're like, what is this? And so it's that safety, it's that connection, it's the love of food, the love of music, the culture of the family. I still have relatives and family members in Nicaragua and in Costa Rica, who they haven't seen, because the family split up.
Right.
To this day, we see those repercussions. And even now, the political situation is probably the worst it's been since the Sandinista movement in Nicaragua. And so my parents aren't able to just easily go back.
Yeah.
They will, but it's just unsafe to do so.
So yeah. Yeah, and that's part of my journey as well was going back to Dominican Republic a couple years ago, and I could remember like DNA activation, like just like an energetic return, like something that had been missing in my life come back to me, and that's that connection to the land and that reciprocity of indigenous cultured people. You know, there is a relationship with the things around you that enrich your lives. That's how you learn to live. You learn to live off the things that you need. And having that stripped from you, to me, is an emptiness that like is hard to quantify. You know, I think we think about the world in these very material things, these objective things. And I think there are just parts of you that just leave, that you don't really ever get back. So I know that it gives me, I'm driven and motivated and honored to be able to give you that return, to get you back to Mexico one day. So I know that'll be important for us, and important for our family, and important for people to see that journey finish, you know, to see that part of the journey finish, to feel safe in that moment. And speaking of feeling safe, this is not a great time to feel safe in America. There is
It's never been a great
never a great time. I mean, you're speaking to a Black man, so I know this very well. We need community, though. You know, when there's hysteria, we need community. One of the things that I have really struggled with is the dynamic of social media and media itself. You know, headlines are designed to get clicks and to grab attention. Social media sometimes is designed to, like, you know, maybe it's a person that's well-wishing, that is wanting to raise awareness, and that serves a purpose. But does that serve a purpose for my Latino self, who is living in this understanding of fear? It's a lived experience. Like, I always find that in like the healing community, there's a lot of talk about fight or flight, without the recognition that people are daily living in fight or flight, moment to moment. So just talk about how complicated it is to build community surrounded by hysteria, and what are some ways that you think we might try, or things that you're trying now that you think may be effective?
Yeah, you know, I think of hysteria as energy, and I do think that like, if you are able to shift that energy and to create something from it, I think that that's like one of the first steps, right? I heard recently that creativity is like the antidote to chaos, right? Like it is, it is in the creation of things and the creation of community that like we get to navigate the hysteria and the craziness of this moment. But I also think like we have to learn how to define community for ourselves, right? I think that there's this general understanding of what community is, but sometimes I think that that understanding is a little narrow, right? Like I think, and also the way that we talk about community implies that there's a one right way to do community, right? Versus like a multitude of ways of being in community with others. And I, you know, ultimately I think that, it is about engaging with people on a deeper level, on like the one-on-ones. You go back to organize. There's a reason that one-on-ones are so successful, and the reasons why people are continuously like building those relationships, because that's where the magic happens. Absolutely. It's not in, you know, the grandeur of the stuff, but it is in those intimate moments with other people where you're like learning about who they are and where they come from and why they're here, and matching those energies in a really positive way. And so, yeah, I think that one of my solutions to it is to create and to think about joy, and to think about what does rest look like? You know, in these moments where rest is truly radical, where creativity is radical, when saying that you care for other people is radical, many saying that you love others is radical. Like that's what we should be doing more of. And I say that knowing that I'm not going to judge anybody else's contributions in this moment, right? So like if you're not in a place where you can do that, that's fine.
Yeah.
We have to learn how to contribute in the ways that we can, and every contribution is a gift, regardless of how small you may deem it. Right?
Absolutely.
That's something that I've been thinking a lot about in our work. It is like, instead of shaming or judging others for how they're showing up in this moment, understand like they might just be contributing the ways that they can, and receive those gifts and then multiplying them, amplifying them in a way that others can, right? Not everybody can. So that's what I'm thinking about in this moment.
Yeah, I think I prioritize being a joy-based decision maker. You know, that's just a day-to-day thing for me. I really like how you talked about defining community. I'm currently reading All About Love by Bell Hooks, and she talks specifically about defining love in a way that you can have something to aspire to. And I think that is important that you said that about community. Define what community means to you. Go out and make that. That's activism. Defining what community is and going and contributing to it. I love that answer. How about you, Alex?
For me, I always go back to, indigenous cultures. Like we move together as one and everybody, like you said, has medicine. Everybody has something to contribute. And I think now more than ever, we're just asking, like, what are your gifts and how can you share them with those around you? I think a lot of the times we put so much on our own shoulders and we feel like it has to come from this person or it has to come from this. And community is about everybody has medicine, everybody's contributing and trusting that everyone is doing their best. And a big shift, I think, for me also is like, how can I make decisions? How also can I gently nudge people and correct them with love, right? Because I think a lot of the times right now people are lost, and I think that's where their fear comes from. It's not being grounded, and so it is really easy to get swept away into, I've done this myself, like I'm doing this alone and it's on me, and remembering that no, when we come together as a community, we are moving together. And that's to me there's such medicine when people just show up with, like, an open heart, not even with, like, "This is what we're gonna do," but just, "I'm here." When someone is at their lowest low and someone can show up and be like, "I got you," and not, "I got you," like, "I'm gonna take your problems away," but, like, "I'm here with you," it makes the biggest difference and the biggest shift.
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking these bell hooks references. I am, at least. You just hit another one. Not beyond definition, but like, how can we show up for each other in ways that feel good? How can we support one another? And she talks about love being the capacity to heal oneself and to heal the other person in that relationship. And that's what you talked about having that ability. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, I think, actually to that latter point, you have to be in community with yourself.
Yeah.
And that I think part of the reason that we see this tension that exists in the world today is because I don't think people have done the inner work in a lot of ways, or they're not attempting to do the inner work. You have to understand your shadows, right? You have to understand like what's driving some of your decision making. You have to understand what's driving some of the ways that you're showing up that may not be as, what's the word, pure or as clean or as, as, oh, it's messy, right? And I think it is easy to forget about the self,
Yeah.
right? In service of everyone else. But if you're not in community with yourself, if you don't understand what's going on with you, and if you don't find that same love and care and support for yourself that you give to others, like there's a balance that it just breaks up, right? And so you're not, I think, as effective in building community. And it can just be harmful to everybody. But we need you. We need people in this. We need people in the world. But when they're not whole, right?
Yeah.
And they're just trucking along. Like we also got to figure out that part as well.
Yeah, we got to figure out a way to navigate that in a way that feels good. I know for me, my response to hysteria is to condense the space around me, to bring it in, to bring all the love in and people that care about me into a space, and to not be as scattered energetically, to not be in so many places. However, I want to build community. I want to show up for you. So talk about ways in which you've navigated like the desire to protect self, and not necessarily protect, but to insulate self, but also have the desire to be out in the community and serve. What is that? I mean, this is what you do on a daily basis, Edgar. This is what you do on a daily basis. Just talk about some of those things.
For me, it's I can fluctuate between like Earth Mother, I will nurture and hold you, but there's also a bad mama jama in there. There's a warrior energy, and so, but I know that that takes up so much energy, so I can only do warrior with intention and at the right time. Where in the beginning of just kind of the last couple of months, I really was asking my spiritual team, like, how can I show up effectively? How can I take care of my community and also take care of myself? And what that looked like for me, actually, it was going back into my shell a little bit and being super intentional about who has access to me, where I'm showing up, who I'm connected to. And so when I am coming out of the shell and into my world and into that with that passion and warrior energy, it's for things like this. It's for community. It's to show up. But most of the time you're gonna find me like underground taking care of like my people, taking care of the people that are doing the work, that are, taking the time to get to know themselves so that they could show up. And for me, what I've had to do is, go back into the shell when I need to take care of myself, when I need to make sure that my battery is always at 100, so that when it is time to show up as a warrior, when it is time to march, when it is time for action, I'm ready.
Absolutely. How about you, Edgar? What are some ways in which you instill that kind of protection, but also that walking that line of service and protection?
I am actively not listening to the urgency.
Mm.
I think there's a point in my life or in career or the beginnings of my career where I felt urgent to be in all these places. Felt imperative. I have to be there. Like, I have to be seen. I have to be seen in the community. I have to be seen, like, hanging out and doing these things and like, supporting others and all this other stuff, right? And I think in some ways a lot about like perception, right? Because I think that's one of the tensions with the community, right? Like, are people seeing you? Are people seeing you contribute? Are they seeing you actively participate in community? And what I've learned is that it's important to diminish the urgency around it, knowing that like nobody is entitled to your contributions.
Absolutely.
That your contributions are of self, right? That you can determine how much you want to contribute, when you want to contribute. How does that contribution look like? And I'm leaning into that. I think I've gotten feedback throughout the last couple of years around like, oh, I haven't seen you here and I haven't seen you there. And my initial response is to be petty. Like, yes, to be real.
Yeah, on purpose. On purpose.
And I've learned to like reserve that, right? Because not everybody is capable of managing through the petty. And I've learned that like, hey, like I've learned to think about it from like, oh, you're missing me. Like, oh, you missed my energy. Yeah. But thank you for inviting me, right?
Absolutely.
It is that reframing of that. But I think it's on my heart today to be like, the rest is so important.
Absolutely.
And showing up for yourself in whatever way that looks like for people, feeling that's important in this moment.
Yeah.
And finding, the joy in reading a book, or finding the joy in like TikTok scrolling.
Yeah.
Finding the joy in these other things, like that helps you, show up for others in different ways. And I'm also learning that not all contributions are visible, right? Like, there are people right now actively working on issues, actively doing incredible things, but they're not in the spotlight, right? They're not active. They're not in front of the cameras. They're not doing these things. And so I think I've learned to be expansive around like what contributions again look like, where they can be found, and then just sitting and listening, right?
Yeah.
We started the Adelante Fund recently, and typically the way that I do things, like I will run with an idea. Give me an idea, like I will respond with it.
Yeah.
Let's get it done. And I heard about 5 weeks ago, we were convened, a group of Latino leaders was convened, and the community needs were, one, we need unified messaging in this moment, right? To stop some of the chaos, to stop some of the misinformation, and we need a mutual aid fund. And I was like, well, I know a thing or two. I don't know about unified messaging because I'll get out of my rant there. But on this mutual aid fund, I was like, I think I can do something around that. I think I can figure some of that stuff out. And I was like, you know what? I don't actually have to do that in this moment. It's not a problem for me to figure out, and it's not something for me to fix. Right. So that was a good first step.
Yeah.
And then I followed up with one of our political figures in the community, and I said, hey, have you had movement on this? Like, this was a clear need. Where's the movement on it? Well, it's there. And so I was like, okay, like that was my sign to kind of continue to pursue it. And then just also being thoughtful that it doesn't belong, the fund itself doesn't belong to me or the organizations in which I work. It belongs to community. And so how do we think about the community advisory committee? How do we think about what transparency looks like? How do we think about how we're serving people? How do we think about how do we expedite resources and get in people's pockets as quickly as they can, right? And so what I really have appreciated about the creation of that is like, one, taking your time and seeing if other people are going to make the contributions first and being comfortable with that. Two, understanding like that when you're talking about mutual aid or support or supporting community, that you have to figure out how to do it in community.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and that's a hard thing to do. You have to listen to others to be comfortable with varying ideas. And you also have to figure out how to drive. Really. But and finally, it's just understanding that we become stewards of resources, not owners of resources. And I think that can be difficult, right? I think the transition from saying like, oh, well, this is my idea, or this is what I created, or this is what I've spent time or energy on, like, you have to shift the mindset to be like, I'm actually a steward of this in this moment. Which means like, I'm one of many people who have a responsibility to the success of this thing or to the importance of this thing or whatnot. And so, yeah, it's an interesting, dynamic. I think Edgar 10 years ago would have thought about it very differently.
Yeah.
And because of all the love and appreciation and support and growth that I've experienced over the last decade or so, I'm much more thoughtful about like, yo.
Because you're doing the work. Because you're doing the work.
Yeah.
And you talk about stewardship. I think that that's such a different, like, such an Indigenous mindset of like, I don't own you. I don't own really anything because nothing, travels with us in the afterlife. But when you start to think of yourself as a steward, then you start to be like, yes, this is something that I need to take care of, whether it's children. And then for me, it's such a big passion. It's the kids, it's the future generations. And so I love that you're bringing that in of like, no, when we start to switch the mindset of this doesn't belong to us, but we take care of it, not just like children, but what is our, relationship and stewardship look like you said, community, with civic duty, with the earth, there's so many things that we have such room for growth.
Yeah. I mean, you said so many things that I was happy about. So I just had to sit over here and smile at you. I hope I don't think you know, nothing going on here. But when you talk about the importance of rest, and we continue to talk about culture, and we continue to talk about people that connect to culture, there are a lot of things in society that we possess, that we own, that don't belong to us. And I think when you talk about rest as someone that's active in the community, building these things, but prioritizing rest, you are prioritizing cycle breaking. You are prioritizing the ability to say, rest is as important as my drive, because I can't drive if I don't have anything in the tank. So I think it's important too that, we do mention like, yeah, this is a person that's out in the community building things and wanting to be a steward and wanting to participate in community in a way that isn't about like, currying favor or credit or things that you can use later on, but really about service. I think that it's important that we have people like you that are focused on, man, I do need to rest. I know I do need to listen. I do need to not be as vocal at times so I can be in service with others. I think it's important that when we talk about community, we show the ways in which we are actively in community. I know I fudged your bio.
You're good.
But I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here. I mean, like it's a lot.
Product of it.
No, you are one of our leaders. Yeah. When I think about and I know you might get a little uncomfortable right now giving your flowers, but when I think about like the leaders, and it's the people that are trying the new things, that are taking care of themselves, and I think that that's such a big part. Like rest, I had to learn to rest because it was not something that was taught to me. I was taught that when you're resting, you're being lazy, that there's always something to do, that you need to be at 100% of the time, and that caused a lot of chaos in my body. It caused autoimmune disease. It caused, I'm grateful for it because it's the thing that I had to overcome to get me here. But that's the thing that I always want to share with my community, because there are so many of those things that are generational that I'm like, no, we have to break that. And the first thing is rest, is taking care of self, is being able to be okay with you being feeling good.
Yeah.
Happy.
And
being in joy.
This part of the conversation just wanted me to just I've been called to just give a shout out to my dad. You know, my dad, his name is Ramon Bienvenido Ibar, and he was adopted to become Ramon Bienvenido McAnderson. He was named Bienvenido because he was 13 pounds and a month late at birth, which I think is hilarious and really fits his personality in general, because he showed up with a bag. But I think about like cycle breaking and what it means for someone like you to represent rest and service to the community. I think about my father who worked the night shift at Hallmark Cards in Lawrence, Kansas for 50 years. He was Volunteer of the Year in 1999 in Lawrence, Kansas for volunteering with art, volunteering with Citizens Review Board, coaching football and basketball teams. He broke cycles for me. When I was in high school, I wanted to work, and he said, "Don't work, dream." So he broke those cycles for me. So I could be an NFL player one day. He wanted me to dream. He didn't want me to work. He said, "You got plenty of time to work." So I think about like who we are as people and who we are in this community. I'm just proud of my father, and I'm proud of you, Edgar, and I'm proud of you, Alex, for being people that have come through circumstances that are challenging, but have continued to serve and find ways to serve. And what's going to be standing in its place are people like me, you know, people that have been able to not have to carry the burden that their father passed down to them. He made sure he didn't hand it to me so I could grow myself and be a difference maker in the world. So I see you and I appreciate you and all that you do for this community and the ways in which you show up. Anything else you want to mention? Anything else you guys want to talk about that's pulling your strings that you think needs to be said today?
I mean, for me, it's just that connection of, and it doesn't have, like you said, it doesn't have to look a certain way. I've started to do like sauna dates instead of coffee dates where I'm like, let's go sweat it out. Let's go on a walk. Let's come and meditate together so that we are connecting and doing that self-care at the same time. But for me, my call to action is just do your work, open up, get to know someone. I'm always curious where with money and with other things, we're like, diversify your portfolio, you know, diversify your life. Like, get to know different people, get to know different stories. Don't sit inside that comfortability of having everyone around you be the same. Yes, it's challenging to and uncomfortable sometimes when you're in the present. You don't know how to act or what to say or what's going to be offensive. But to me, it's like ask questions. Don't sit in that ambiguity. Like ambiguity to me, it is not a good thing for me. So I'm constantly asking questions so that I can understand. And if we all just did that, if we just allowed ourselves to um, see each other as human and hear everyone's stories and just connect like on here versus here, I think that can create some big shifts in our community.
Absolutely. How about you, Edgar?
I got a couple of things. I just don't know how to organize them. But I think first, I want luxury for our people. And, I think that we as a community have decided that productivity equals worth, right? Like how much we contribute, consistently contributing, like that is equivalent to like what we are able, like what our value is. And I'm moving and pushing away from that mentality. I want people to be able to enjoy their coffee in the morning. I want people to enjoy read the book that they want to read.
Yeah.
I want people to enjoy going on a trip. I want people to understand that like luxury is meant for us all. And I use the word luxury because I don't know if there's a better word for it, right? I'm sure that there's a better word. But it is in the small moments that you can take for yourself and for your family and for your community to enjoy and process and be together that I want that for our people, and I want people to know that that's enough.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's more than enough. And the other thing that I think I want to point out is that like service isn't warm and fuzzy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I hear podcasts like this, or when I hear people talking about leadership or conversations, I imagine that it's supposed to feel like, warm and fuzzy and loving and like, oh, we're having happy hour and we're just laughing at like leading and like da 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 da. And like, it's a struggle. It is a daily struggle to continue to make a choice to show up.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it is for me, I've had to learn how to curate my mental health. Right. Because being in community means that like you're receiving everyone's energy. Right. Like being in community means that like you're putting yourself out there and you're increasing your vulnerability, right? Which means like you're open to a lot. And so I tend not to view leadership or being in community as like this like lovey-dovey warm thing. It can be. There are plenty of warm and powerful and loving moments in that space. And like that's not the only thing that you experience in those moments. Um, and so I think that that's why being in community with yourself is so important, right? Because you have to judge like how much you're able to take. You have to judge about how much you're willing to give, and only you can determine that. Others will tell you where I should be doing, right? Like, and others will use shame and other weapons to make sure that you are in alignment in some way, shape, or form. And I think my journey in this moment is about like, well, how are you accountable to yourself? Right. And we talk a lot about accountability to other people, right? Like, I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to hold you accountable. But like the reality is like, how are you holding yourself accountable to show up in the ways that you want to show up? Regardless about around how the world is around you. That is incredibly difficult. Yes, it is. And it's a calling that sometimes you don't want to answer the call. Like, sometimes you don't want to be the person that like steps into whatever the role. It is a sacrifice, right? It is all these other things. And so, yeah, for me, like, I don't want to come off as like, this is amazing. And it is a great privilege. Yeah. It is a great responsibility. And like, ugh.
It's a lot. It is a lot, and I think that that's like the part of like the self, because you hear so much around, right? And you get to decide what energy you let in. But if you have discernment, if you know self, then when you hear that, you're like, that's not true. And I think that that's why when we advocate, because we hear all these things about our communities, and sometimes it's hard because sometimes our own community believes it, and I'm like, no, you are powerful. You come from greatness. You come from like magic, and remembering and tapping into that. And I remember a message that I heard from my ancestors this weekend that like brought tears, because they said, you come from the roots of the tallest tree. And like that, when I felt that, when I saw that, and I saw this tree that went all the way up into the sky, and like we come from that. We are the roots of the tallest trees, because we've been here for a long, long time, and we've overcome a lot of different things. And so tapping into that, into your mastering your power and knowing that you're held. And I think that when you find your inner power, then the path gets a little bit easier, because then you have that discernment and clarity to know how to move.
And discernment is like any other thing. Like, it requires practice, right? And it requires you being in the arena, and it requires you being willing to like listen to it all and then make decisions that you feel are aligned to yourself. What I hate about all this work that we do is that like you forget that it's practice. Yeah. Like, all practice. And it's an unending practice, which also I do not like. I am goal oriented. I want to complete things 100% perfection. And like for me, the struggle with the way that we talk about things and the way that we are showing up is that like it does require a daily practice. Yeah. That's why I don't like therapy sometimes. I don't like therapy not because like it's not helpful. I don't like therapy because it's like, yeah, but did you breathe? Have you looked at I want to just share, and I want to give you flowers too. A few weeks ago, you just messaged me, I think randomly, right? You have a tendency of messaging people and like, share
Feel my people.
energy. And I think you mentioned that like you reminded me that I was protected, right? You sent me a message and you said, "Hey, you're protected." And when you did that, like I was able to make a decision that I've been like on, right? Like I've been holding back on, and I think that that's the type of community that I'm so blessed to have, right? It is to be reminded that you are worthy, that you are loved, that you're appreciated, right? And it doesn't happen in the public, right? It happens in those moments where somebody is just, it's an act of love to be able to send somebody a message, yeah, randomly, unexpectedly, and remind them of something that who they are, oh, at least the good parts, right? Sometimes even the bad parts. And that was just really helpful and thoughtful. And I don't think you may not always understand or appreciate like how that changes people. and how that actually allows them to act and to create and to build. And so I really appreciate you doing that, because for me, I think I was like, you're right, I am protected. So I'm gonna go and like take a little risk right now and do this thing, because like the universe has got me.
Yeah.
And that's something that you have to like continuously remind yourself, right? Like, I do believe that the universe is ever evolving in my favor.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sometimes it's a little sketchy. I'm like, I don't know if you're doing this.
Yeah.
So it is nice to have those reminders, because it allows me to lean into what, I'm supposed to be doing. And so sometimes we just need that little bit of kindness. Makes the world a different place.
Absolutely. That's my favorite thing about Alex. I think that there are a lot of people doing work, and there's a lot of people that want to heal our community, but who's going to heal the healers? I think Alex does a good job of finding the people that are making an impact and making sure they're good. Like, what can I do for you? And it's not monetary, or it's not something I can give you, but how can I show up for you? How can I give love to you? And that's the way that we live our lives together. We try to find people that need our medicine and give it to them so that they can become whatever they are intended to be. I think there's not getting the credit is something, like you mentioned before, like that's fine. Like, I don't want to get the credit. I want you to call me though when you have a question. I want to hear you. I want to listen to you. And I think that's where we are now, in shifting the way that we look at these things, because a lot of these structures are not designed for our success. And with our current person in office, you can see that they're just openly telling you that these things aren't for you. I don't care who gave you the money. It could be community, but it could be from the tax money. It's not for you. That can be deflating, or it can be empowering. The structures around you don't exist to serve you. That means you can create whatever you want. So I think that sometimes we see some of these things in hysteria, but if we can stick in personal accountability and find love and community, we can exist far beyond these structures ever imagine. I always say that lack cannot imagine the potential of love. So everything that they have told you that you couldn't do, you can do. The rules are gone. I mean, listen to me, people. The rules are gone, right? The rules are gone. And when the rules are gone, it will allow you to build whatever you want to build. And if we keep building community with people like Edgar and Alex, the shift and the storytelling will happen organic and naturally for all of us and make Kansas City a better place. Thank you for joining us on From Home to Here, the podcast. I'm Brandon McAnderson. This is Alex McAnderson. Tell them how they can get in contact with you.
Everything Villalobos Vitality, all social media, and online, www.villalobosvitality.com.
And Edgar.
You can find me at EJPKC2, the number 2.
We don't know what happened to the first one, but you can find him at E.
There's a story behind that, but that'll be for the next one.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. Have a good one.